Welcome to Defn. It's episode number 70. Almost 4 years by May, I think. Yeah, I think we're now part of the history now. I think, I think if we started a bit earlier, we would have been on that golden record that we sent on Voyager. I mean, we are like that level important to the, humanity these days, our podcast. In case, you didn't realize, the people who are listening, you're part of a phenomenon now. It has been going on for 4 years. Is that enough bullshit?
I think what you want to say is that this podcast will be the future NFT.
Yeah, exactly.
The one and only.
Each episode is going to be one NFT.
Each episode, yeah.
Or maybe
each
just
track,
each
track.
Exactly, each track. Yeah. So prepare to sell your belongings and buy our NFT shit on with your whatever the crypto coin that fancies.
The Dogecoin. We only accept Dogecoins.
Yeah, the Doge to the moon. Anyway,
we're Doge people. We're not cat people. We're not cat coins.
Yes,
fuck the cat coins. Sorry,
that's
they just
true.
They just don't move it for me. But
I think we got to take a stand, right? I mean, the world is polarized between cats and dogs, and we know dogs are better. There is one thing that we agree on, right? Apart from you using inferior editors and all of the crap. But,
well, we could rethink this the sort of the subcontext of the podcast now. Like it was a vegetarian Clojure vegetarian podcast, but now it can be a Clojure vegetarian dog loving podcast.
Yeah, that is on NFT.
Number one. The number one.
Yes.
Because the other vegetarian podcasts, they're bound to like cats, and fuck those guys. Yeah.
Anywho, so on that happy note, so I think in the last couple of episodes, we have this trend of, bringing back our guests again. So on that, we're not breaking the tradition, at least not in this episode. So we brought back Yehonathan all the way from Israel. And I think last time we spoke a lot about Klipse and then this explorative programming, all sorts of weird stuff. So please go and listen to that episode first, because otherwise you're missing, a lot of content already. But now I'd like to welcome you back on the episode and to the podcast. Hello, Yehonathan.
Hello, Ray, Vijay. Great to be
Here
again.
Hello. Yes.
Well, you've been a busy boy, haven't you? You're not just you aren't just sticking with Klipse.
Yeah. Someone asked me what is the connection between Klipse and data-oriented programming, and I was, what the fuck? Why should it be? Should there be a connection? But the question sticked on my mind, and suddenly I found the connection.
So they're right then.
Probably, it's when you ask a dummy question, that's the best way to stick to capture someone's attention.
Hey, that's our job, asking dummy questions. I mean, don't put that responsibility to other people.
So someone already did. One question less to ask.
Dag-nabbit, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll definitely be having lots more of stupid questions as we go along.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So first, let's get started. So what have you been up to these days? Because we know Klipse is one of the amazing piece of work that you've done that has been now, I think, practically used in most of the websites these days if they want to show off any Clojure stuff. And the second thing that you're talking about is the data-oriented programming. So what about it, and what are you working on in Clojure world these days?
In Clojure, I work full-time for a Clojure company in Israel, one of the few Clojure companies in Israel, in the domain of cyber, smart people from the Israeli army that takes all the secret from how to defend or how to attack terrorists, and they make a lot of money out of it.
Okay.
So I'm not as smart as those guys, but I'm a decent Clojure developer. And for some reason, they decided to use Clojure, which I was really happy to discover. And so that's what I'm doing most of my day. I'm lucky.
So you're fighting terrorism with Clojure. Is that the headline news?
Not fighting terrorism, but actually it's more threatening industries and scaring them
Ooh.
that they could be attacked by terrorists or
I see.
competitors.
Okay.
And
But
they should
you're-
use our tool to protect themselves.
Okay, I was saying.
But it's slightly better than, are you fighting that? Are you fighting terrorism? No, actually, this is actually, internal catering application that we are trying to figure out. The company is ordering pizzas from my application. So, well, close enough. Fighting terrorism by providing pizzas. But yeah, cool. But what stack do you use, by the way? Is it top secret, or is it something that you can announce publicly on this
I can announce.
hugely popular podcast?
Yes, I can announce.
It's dangerously dangerously popular
Dangerously
podcast.
popular.
Yeah. So the company is called Psychognito, and
Wow.
they provide something that they call attack surface management. So the customers are big enterprise that have millions of assets online, and they simply don't know what they have, or even if they know, they don't have any tool to manage all the assets and the security hole that they might have. So that's the attack surface of a company. And Psychognitos kind of detect automatically what are all the assets of a company, and they do it 80% automatically. And that's quite a nice algorithm. Just by having the name of a company, the technology is able to discover the graph from one node to another node to another node, and discover all the assets that belong to the company, and then find the vulnerabilities. So that's the product.
But yeah, this is a domain that we haven't heard much of Clojure, right? In the cybersecurity area, this must be something novel, at least. Yeah.
Well, if you listen to the most recent episode of Cognicast, my friend Mia,
I don't,
who was a great impersonator, she mentioned that she's working for a cybersecurity company as well.
Oh, that's also Clojure.
Also Clojure, yeah. Oh. So I think
that. But is it really like core cybersecurity thing, or is it actually one of those
proper like Cisco
internal task management system?
No, Cisco.
Oh.
Cisco proper like.
Oh yeah, Cisco. Yeah. I think we know Cisco have been using it for a long time, right?
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Anyway,
anyway, coming back to
Psycho, they split the part that deals properly with the vulnerability detection is written in Python. And the part that analyzes and parses all the data and makes sense and builds the graph is written in Clojure.
Okay.
So they can afford the slow bits for the vulnerability detection then. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah.
But how big is the team actually?
Around, I would say 40 developers, something like that.
Wow.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so back to Vijay's original question: what kind of tools do you use? Clojure tools. What kind of stack you got there, or is it just all home built stuff?
No, home built stuff. And right now we are integrating Mali.
Right.
Yeah. We have actually a very nice habit. Once every 2 weeks, we do a meetup internally, and once it's an internal, it's an employee that gives the lecture, and every other 2 weeks it's someone from the outside. So we brought Christophe Grand, we brought Timothy, and we brought Tommy to talk about Mali. And next week we'll have Babashka. And it's quite interesting. It's really exciting to have people give, stars from the Clojure community gives talk for 30 minutes, half an hour. We had Frédéric Peshansky, a French academic. So it's quite I like it.
Nice.
Yeah, very
So
good.
and that's what triggered the adoption of Mali after he gave his talk and explained what's the benefits of Mali and why it's better than Spec, etc. We decided to adopt it. So it's the new way of promoting open source.
Yeah, I think that I used to work in India in one of the big names, one of the Oracle and these big companies, and we used to have that as well, like weekly, not weekly, but the monthly special guest coming in. I know Google does that a lot as well. Sometimes completely non-technical people like physicists or somebody just to inspire people, which is just pretty cool. I mean, when you're at that scale, it's much easier to get those people. But if you're a startup with two guys and or two girls sitting somewhere, then asking Neil deGrasse Tyson to come up and then give a lecture about Pluto, that's going to be like an unreachable target. But this is super cool, by the way. But 40 people, 40 developers, mostly working in Clojure, or is it a division between Python and Clojure?
Most, I would say 80% Clojure and 20% Python.
Wow. So is it like the biggest Clojure company in Israel then?
In Israel, there is one big company called AppsFlyer. I don't know if you heard about that.
Yeah. I know. Yes.
So there are, I think, 300 Clojure developers or something like that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I remember because I think we had a couple of speakers from AppsFlyer for Dutch Clojure Day.
Yeah.
So that was but those are ad companies, right? Those are mobile ads and
mobile ad companies,
something like that. Analytics, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So nice. In your company now, you've got like you've went from 1 to 2 to 5 to 10 to 20 to 30 odd developers, and it seems like you're operating around a particular product. How agile do you find Clojure maintains itself, or what are you doing to maintain Clojure's kind of agility in the face of scale? Have you had to make some big decisions or some design choices that help you there?
So first of all, it's it's a data pipeline. The core of the product is a data pipeline, so it's split in multiple services. So each piece of software is not too big.
Right, that's good. It's already a good decision then. Yeah.
Yes. And the struggle is when we need kind of an understanding of the schema, either for, when a developer starts coding, and of course there is no documentation, nothing, because good code doesn't need to be documented.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Sure.
And then you don't know what you have in hand. You have an IP. Probably it's a map, but what are the fields in the map? You need to put a breakpoint or something, or open up the REPL and discover example by example and guess what is the model. And sometimes it's painful, I would say. The dynamism and the flexibility of Clojure, sometimes it's painful. And especially when it's nested, when you have a full hierarchy, you have a map and a nested field and another nested field, and then you don't remember at what level of the nesting you are, and you make stupid mistakes, and you forget to put something in a vector, and it doesn't work, and you don't understand why. So I hope that Mali would be helpful. One for documenting, and two even for catching locally
structural when we develop, kind of issues. Yeah.
Yes, when you just forget a field or pass a bad field or bad type or whatever. So that's.
But you didn't use any specs for this one, or?
No, we don't use specs.
You haven't looked into these things. Okay.
No, and what's interesting is that there is, and I'm not sure that Mali is going to solve that, but there is for Psychognito there is one big data model that is shared across the dozens of services. An IP is the same, whether it's by this producer, by this worker, by the app, by this or that. An IP will always have the same field and the same semantics. And we are looking for
Okay.
ways to put the schema somewhere, but not inside the app. We don't want to have the schema as code.
No.
We want to have the
No.
schema in a file that somehow is going to be shared between all the services, or maybe a la carte. Each service would, maybe we have a file for IP, a file for domain, and a file for IP ranges, and somehow aggregate. So it's an interesting challenge. Federation of
So you're thinking
schema.
something like like a schema registry. I mean, usually in the big data world, or in Kafka, for example, you try to have like a schema registry where you register all the schemas, and then each application is pulling some specific parts. So,
but they have that in Mali. Actually, they have different types of schema registers that you can register things and have different kind of different kind of models around what those registries look like. But
so that means you can run it as a service separately, or is it part of the same application?
Well, you can always run anything as a service, can't you? It's just data, but it's just data, so you can store it somewhere that you can pull on. It's up to you how to run it. There is a in-memory registry that you just like spec you just def into.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can definitely run a service with it as well.
Okay.
But then we need to be careful, because Mali allows you to put predicates as code. And I'm not sure it's for our use case it's going to be a good practice, because we want the schema to be static.
But that's
and
true of spec, isn't it?
Yeah. For spec even more. But maybe something like JSON schema, or in the spirit of JSON schema, is maybe more appropriate. I don't know. We are
interesting.
We are experimenting, and I think something that interesting, although Python is a small part of our tech stack, but we always think generically. So the code, even when the code is written in Clojure, when services communicate, they don't communicate with Eden. We prefer to communicate with JSON to be more JSON, friendly for non-Clojure code. For
and it
tooling
gives you
also,
choices. It gives you implementation choices, I guess, as well then.
Yes, and for tooling also, Eden is great, but it's not, you don't have tools for parsing Eden or observing Eden in the browser or exploring. So that's...
What about, we were talking about this before, but, the graph sort of concept, because, everyone is like, well, there was a lot of buzz a few years ago around GraphQL from Facebook, and then there's different libraries popping up from the Clojure world, from Nubank and from Walmart, So is that something also you've looked at this like graph type?
Yeah, we have integrated Lassinia, the GraphQL Walmart implementation. And I don't know if I like it or not, because it's the GraphQL is very, very rigid.
Right.
For example, if you have you cannot say I have a map and I don't know what are the fields. Even in somewhere, even if you know, I don't know, 90% of the field, but somewhere you have, for example, not a DNS record, but a record with, forgot the name, not a DNS, a register with, arbitrary fields. And that's life. There are in the, I forgot the name, where you register a domain, you have to put, you have like a map of data, and you don't know a priori what are the fields. And GraphQL does not allow you to express that, to say I have just a JSON. So you do either you say, okay, I have a string, and the client will parse it as JSON, or I have a list of tuples where, but it's not really a map, and it's pain in the ass.
But GraphQL
is very rigid. It's very, very rigid.
Because it requires schema, right? I mean, you need to define a schema up front to put the stuff in GraphQL and then query it back.
And also, you are not allowed in the, let's say, in the JavaScript where you build the query. If you build from a front end or Clojure script, there is no real way to manipulate the query as data. You have either the string, the GraphQL syntax, which is amazing, and it's not JSON, it's something very human readable.
Somewhere in the middle.
But you cannot manipulate it programmatically. It's the same pain as SQL. You can pass into an abstract syntax tree, and then you cannot manipulate. And if you just want to say, okay, I have two queries and I want to compose into one, you cannot do that. You have to do it statically and have a file and a query and have a Webpack process that compiles the file and create a JavaScript object.
So I guess, you know, the final one is the RDF. You know? Which I guess is like the Datomic Crux, you know, the whole data log type thing. Maybe that's what we should be getting excited about.
Maybe, yeah.
But why not though? I mean, you know, I'm not joking about that because to me, I mean, you know, Mali is a bit like that, you know, and I think having like we'll come on to the book that you've written, but you know, having like loosely defined entities, you know, entity attribute value type things seems like a perfect model because it's super flexible, you know.
Did you do you guys know this guy from Brazil that created an awesome library called his name is Walker Lucio, and the library is
Pathum.
Pathum.
I think it's much better than GraphQL, and it's in the spirit of RDF. And he shows me the other day all kind of amazing stuff that you can. The query discovers the topology of the graph on its own. It's really amazing, and it's possible just because it's stored as, you know, data, very simple data. Okay, let me transition to the book with a question for us, for the three of us. Not a dummy question. The question is going to be: do you guys think, or do we think, that namespace keywords is inherently related to data-oriented programming?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, that was too fast.
Okay. No, I don't think so.
No.
Okay.
That's a terrible idea. It's good we got the video there, you know. I can can see Yehonathan going, no, the answer is no, you idiots, don't fool yourself. Yeah, we got to warn us for these trick questions, Yehonathan. You know, this is bad treatment of the podcast host here. But, cut him off. Stop him.
But what is the relationship then with the namespaced keywords and the data programming or data-oriented programming?
Yes.
Maybe it's better to say, what do you mean by data-oriented programming?
Okay.
You know, that's a better place to start at. You know.
Yeah, let's get some background. I mean, we've been bullshitting for like 20 minutes now, so let's start talking about the real stuff, and we'll circle back to all this other shit.
Yes.
So you're writing a book, Yehonathan.
Yeah, I'm writing a book called Data-Oriented Programming. And it has nothing to do with
I've had a look at the early access, and I can say it's very, very good. So I think congratulations on the work you've done so far, and you know, I'm pretty sure you'll have it completed soon.
That's a very interesting concept by Manning, the fact that they release the book before it's totally written. It's very agile, and I wouldn't expect from a publisher, a book company, to be so agile and innovative. And already I got feedback from readers, and I've changed the remaining parts of the book. I've decided to include new chapters and to put away other chapters, and I get feedback about mistakes or things that are not clear. So it's very, very valuable for me as an author, and for the people that will buy the book at the end. It will be a better, higher quality than the one that the quality of the book, like we do, in a SaaS. We deploy an MVP and then we improve or pivot, and it's interesting to apply these ideas to. So it's a book that is not about Clojure. Actually, I started 3 years ago to write a book about Clojure, and it got into the same stage of MIB, but it was a total failure. So the publisher told me, we are not going to follow the project, but we like you. So if you have another idea, we are open to hear, but not Clojure.
Yeah.
And that's the idea I came up with, data-oriented programming. And right now, the book, in terms of sales, does really well, beyond my expectation. And so on one hand, it's not Clojure. It's not targeted at people who want to learn Clojure, but it's nothing but Clojure. It's full of Clojure. So it's Clojure spirit. And I feel...
So you tricked them.
Yes, I feel like Jesus. He was a Jewish, and he discovered that it was too complicated to convince everybody to become Jewish. So he took the best part of the Judaism and sell it as Christianism.
Made data-oriented programming.
So data-oriented programming.
So Christianism is JavaScript in this case. Yeah.
Maybe.
Jesus script.
Jesus script.
Yes. JScript.
JScript.
JScript. So it's. I don't think that we are going to be able to bring...
Let's hope you're not going to get crucified by the Clojure community.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. And I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Or I'm not sure.
Well, from the stuff I've read in the book, I think everybody will be very pleased that you're representing, even if it's not the...
no, but actually it's not the Jewish that crucified Jesus. It's the Romans.
The Romans, yeah.
So you mean all the C++ people will get you?
If you're very precise about it, the Jews could have stopped it, but didn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Probably.
I think the Romans kind of, like Pontius Pilate did offer to have him not, to be dealt with by the Jewish. But anyway, let's not get into that because
but it's
going to be a very bad story.
No.
Yeah.
I can really imagine Java folks crucifying me. And for pretending dynamic programming is a good idea. And I could see Rich Hickey not saving me and letting me be crucified.
Right. Right. Okay. That's so perfect. Yeah. Okay.
Now
that analogy is out of the way. Now we can talk about data-oriented programming now.
Okay. So really, for me at least, I don't know if it's the same for you. I feel that I am smarter in Clojure than I used to be in Java or C++. I've been able to write code that I was never able to write. The riddles that they ask when they want to interview. Yeah. I was really bad at it, really, really bad. I could not solve any of them. And in Clojure, my fingers solve them. I don't have to think even. And I've asked myself, what is it in Clojure that makes it so different than other programming languages? For sure, the fact that it's functional, but there are many functional languages. For sure, the fact that it's a Lisp and we have the REPL, yes, great. But there are many languages with the REPL. And after turning around and around and around, I discovered with the help of the Clojure community that what makes Clojure stand out away from any other programming language is the fact that it's data-oriented. And I've make real work of research trying to formulate very precisely what is the meaning of being data-oriented programming, or what are the principles, the concrete principles of data-oriented programming. And if you listen to Rich Hickey's talk, you probably feel illuminated and wow, it's amazing. But it's at a very, very high level. It's very abstract. It's it's not tangible, and it's very hard to, I don't know if you tried, but if you try to take Rich Hickey's idea and share them with someone that is not convinced, it will be very hard, because you are probably not as talented as Rich, and it will be hard to convey the ideas.
I mean, we can dispute that. I mean, as you know,
come on. Yeah.
I mean, our stupidity is beyond imagination. So we will tell you that, yes, we are smarter than Rich.
Okay. The ideas are, when you listen to them, you say, oh, okay, yes. But when you try to explain, you miss something.
Yeah.
And I want it to be very, very, very concrete and down to earth. What does it mean, data-oriented programming, and why it is beneficial? And I came up with 3 principles, 3 simple principles. And you probably...
the 3 commandments of
the Trinity.
Clojure Jesus.
The Trinity.
The Holy Trinity.
The Holy Trinity. So...
It's slowly becoming a theology.
It's a theme.
Yeah, it's going to be a theology podcast.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
If you look at my birth date, you will be very, very surprised. Do you have a guess?
Is it the 6th of the 6th, 1966?
No, better.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
It's a Christmas.
Jesus' birthday.
Yeah.
It's birthday of Jesus.
Oh, it's the 31st. Okay. Yeah.
25 of
mine was better though. 6th of June, 1966.
Oh, you are 6th of June? You was born on 6th of June?
No. It's just 6666. You know, it's mark of the beast. Yeah.
So the Holy Trinity is
Yeah.
So the what do we have? The Father, the Son, and the
and the
Holy Ghost.
The Holy Ghost.
Spirit.
So number 1 is that we want to separate code from data. We don't want to be object oriented. We don't want to have data hidden or encapsulated in objects. So that's an easy one. Number 2, we want data to be immutable. We don't want any side effects or non-purity. And that's okay. And number 3 is that we want.
By the way,
represent...
before you go on, number 1. Sorry, go on. Are we going to discuss each of these 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Let's go.
Yeah.
What's number 3?
Number 3 is that we want to represent data as data with generic data structures. That's it. Before we deep dive into each of them, just to make things tangible for the folk that listen to us. So number 1, separate code from data. It is the discussion between object-oriented languages and, let's say, non-object-oriented languages. Number 2, no side effects. It's functional programming. We don't want side effects.
Yeah.
And until now, you can be in OCaml or in Haskell or any language like that. But number 3, that we represent data as data, is quite specific to Clojure and to JavaScript. But JavaScript doesn't have the number 2, that data is immutable.
Yeah.
So you could say that data-oriented programming is like functional programming plus generic data structure. Or you could say it's like JavaScript plus immutable data. Or you could say it's Clojure. Okay, so that's the background.
JavaScript has objects, though.
Yeah, but you could do, let's say you do JavaScript without object, without classes.
Yeah.
And it's quite idiomatic. It's not, you could also do, you could do Python also without classes and Ruby without classes. But I think it's in JavaScript, nobody will shoot you if you don't use classes. In Python, you will probably, it's dangerous not to use classes.
Yeah. So,
well, let's go back to number 1 then. Go back to number 1. So number 1 is like no data encapsulation, essentially. Yeah, which, like you say, is the fundamental cleft between the two. Yeah. Let's say it's the schism in religious terms, between the two churches.
Yes, exactly.
But I'm kind of interested in that because I get it, I'm sold, but these people that like their types, they like this encapsulation. So what's your argument against it? I mean, apart from like we all know it. So since you're going to be very concrete, what is your like bullet in the head? Like, you know,
yes, exactly.
No, okay. Let's go bullet in the head. It's better. Yeah.
So first of all, let's
how do you kill that other argument?
Let's identify the enemy. So the enemy is the enemy of principle number 1 is not types, is object oriented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And my the magic card that I have.
It's getters and setters, basically. Oh, actually, it's not. It's
more than
it's mutation through some object method, essentially.
Yes.
Adding behaviors to the data.
Yeah.
So and I spend the whole first chapter of the book acknowledging, let's say, the inherent complexity or the tendency to complexity when you build a system with objects. And I did the exercise. So in the book, I take an example of building a library management system, and I implemented it, at least at the level of the design, as if I were a Java developers. So I really had to feel the pain. It was very, very hard. And the number 1 argument is complexity. And I cannot draw in the podcast. I mean, I can draw, but nobody would be able to see my drawing. But imagine
yes, need to imagine.
Imagine a class diagram, a classic class diagram. So you have class, and the class has relationship with other classes, and you have many kind of relationships. You have inheritance, you have composition, you have association, you have usage. Let's say that the 4 basic ones. And very, very quickly, your class diagram becomes complex. Okay, now imagine you take the exact same diagram, exact same design, and you do something very, very simple. You take every class and you split it into methods and data. So methods, all the methods will be static, and they will receive data as an argument. And just by doing this split, instead of one complex graph, one complex diagram, you have 2 simple disjoint diagrams. And when you see it in your eyes, you feel immediately that the resulting system is simpler. It's less entangled, less relationships. You can understand each subgraph in isolation. You can think about the relationships between data on their own. You can model your data before you think about what are you going to do with the data and what are the functions. Or you can start with the function and then design the data appropriately. Divide and conquer. So that's, I think, the number 1 argument, and it's very visual.
What about people who would argue then that, I want to have a safe way to change the data, and object orientation gives me a safe way to change data?
What do you mean, a safe way to change data?
Well, I've got an object. It's got a method on it called, I don't know, change the clock or something, and I can do that in my object, and you don't need to worry about it. I'll just make it happen. So I don't need, and also the good thing about that is it's atomic according to that object. Whereas if I have the data outside, then anyone can fuck with it.
Yes.
I'm trying to play devil's advocate here.
I know, and you are very bad at it. But let's pretend that you are. Let's pretend that you are. You really mean what you ask. And so number 2 is easier for me to tackle, and the answer is because we are going to make sure the data is immutable. We don't have to worry about what's happening if someone is going to change my data, because nobody is going to change your data because the data is immutable. So the principles are not independent. If you do separate code from data, but you allow mutations, that then you shoot on your foot, so it won't be safe.
Yeah.
But the number one.
But I think the thing that object-oriented people get very confused by the fact that you have immutable data, but I want to change data.
Yeah. And okay, so I can go also into something a bit philosophical in a moment, but before that, let me rephrase your question, and I don't have a good answer. I will just acknowledge the trade-off. When you have an object in your hand, you know what are all the methods that can touch the object. It's the method of the class. And I don't mean just for refactoring purposes. I mean, let's put aside the refactoring safety or the easiness of doing refactoring. It's a different topic. It doesn't have to do with complexity. When I talk about complexity, I talk about the inherent complexity of a system that run, not the easiness to change the system. That's a different one, and we could talk about that, but it's so let's put that aside. But there is an issue, or there is a limitation when you separate code from data. When data is decoupled from code, when you have a piece of data, when you want to figure out what are all the functions that know how to deal with this data, is difficult. It's difficult. And I think that with tools like Condo or CLJ Condo or stuff like that, there are ways to say, okay, I have a map with those fields. What are the functions that can receive this kind of map? But it's just the beginning. It will never be as straightforward as asking the question in an object-oriented world. And also,
but maybe the question is wrong, though. Maybe that's a wrong question. Maybe if I can play non-devil's advocate for a second, I would say that question is, if we go back in the history, we'd say we'd rather have like 1,000 functions over data than 1,000 data structures. So, I mean, we can argue the toss about those, but I think the generic argument about complexity versus simplicity is that, you might want to tie down a particular transformation function on this particular bit of data, but why? Why do you want to do that? Why
let's say I have a customer.
Make it an open system. Yeah.
No, I can play now the devil's advocate, and I can say, okay, I have a customer in my hand. I have data that represent a customer, and I want to know what are all the. And let's say I want to upgrade the customer to VIP. Where do I look for this method? Where is it? Or I want to retrieve the password of the customer or the purchase history of the customer. Where would I find it? It's difficult, but I think that it has to do with easiness. I mean, for someone that knows the project, it will be easier than for someone that doesn't know the project. It's not inherent. It's not more complex or less complex. It's easier. And I think that the way we approach data in data-oriented programming is almost like the way we approach data that is in a database. I mean, when you have a table in a database, you don't know what are all the pieces of code that retrieve data from this table. It's a question with no answer.
No, you don't want to know.
You don't want to know. And you don't want to know, you don't want to allow yourself to rename a column in a table and say, okay, please bring me a tool that when I rename a column of the table, all the code is going to be updated and will work automatically without breaking all customer. No.
Hey, but if you use Hibernate,
Yes.
if you use an ORM tool.
Yeah, but like you say, then you're kind of limited to the code rather than all the kind of reporting tools and all the other bits and pieces. So you haven't got an open system anymore. That's the advantage of the data orientation.
Yes, and it's open and it has limitation. It's less easy, I would say. It requires.
But given this trade-off, would you say that data-oriented programming fits some domains better than the other domains?
Yes. And the domain that it fits for is what we call information systems.
Mhm.
It's not good for game. If you want to build a game,
Yeah.
you don't do
Yeah.
a game with data-oriented programming. If you want to write a compiler,
Yeah.
you don't write a compiler with data-oriented programming. When you know your domain and when you know exactly what fields are going to be in your data and it's not dynamic and the system is closed, the data of the system lives in the system and ends in the system, then it doesn't make sense to have data-oriented programming. But when you fetch data from somewhere and you need to pass the data to
pass it on to
another
somebody else,
one in many different formats, you need to be then the ability to be open and to manipulate data and to pass data forward, even when you are interested only in two fields, and to pass all the other fields without understanding, without having to care about what are the other fields, is really important. And that's what we do in every Clojure application.
I mean, one could argue that a compiler is, somewhat of a text-oriented, data-oriented system. Once you get to an AST, it's data.
Yeah, but it doesn't accept random shit, right? I mean, a compiler is very strict on what it is accepting. Yeah.
You have, children and I don't know, first argument, second argument, and that's it. So it's
because you're following a very rigid schema, right? I mean, you parse it already. You're writing a parser for a specific language.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, but I mean, I think a lot of languages like Clojure, which are dynamic, are not so obvious, and they still have a compiler.
No, but I mean, Clojure has a compiler. That's because it only needs 7 forms. That's it, and then you can build the whole shit from that one. But if you see all other languages, they have a very specific definition of the language, and you can't deviate from it. I can't suddenly just change in Python. There is def, then I'm gonna just change it to, I don't know, fed. That's not how it is gonna work, because it has very specific lexical elements that it is looking for. So I think in that sense, compiler is a closed domain.
Well, but I mean, it doesn't have to be an open domain to be data oriented, does it? Or maybe it's in your definition it does, Yehonathan. But
no, it doesn't have to, but it's more beneficial when the data lives originally outside of your application. I think that's the best definition I could give. Does the data live somewhere before you write the program or not? If the answer is yes, it lives in the database, then it makes sense to represent data as close as it lives in the database and not as close as you want in your program for easiness reasons or for convenience reasons. And that's the tension. That's the tension. Do you start from your needs or do you start from the reality? And in that algorithm, we say we start from the reality.
My needs are real, though.
Yeah, your needs are real. Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah. So and by the way, it's really interesting to see that even languages like Java and C#, they promote records. In Java 14, there is something called a record, which is a class with only members, no code, and it's immutable, and it's immutable, and it's automatically serializable.
Yeah.
And you get a hash code and equal
the classic the value object.
Yes, the value object, exactly.
The value object.
Yeah. So I think that even
I remember
Java folks,
going to a talk by someone. I think we're going to a talk by, I don't know if it was one of the Java compiler guys, but he was saying that, value object. If it's a value, it's not an object. If it's an object, it's not just values. No, these two things do not exist.
Yeah, the value object. Yeah.
But of course, it does exist because like you say, in the end, like if you're doing a lot of water, a lot of carrying of water between one system and another system, it makes no sense to carry all these functions along with it. So I think people, you're right. I mean, people have intuitively kind of gone for that kind of stripping away of objects through just to data, And I think a lot of languages have maps and stuff like this, which allow for a weak typing. Almost all languages these days have that.
Yes. And here I have a surprise for you guys.
Oh.
How familiar are you with the implementation of immutable data structure in Clojure? And the trick
we
makes
basically
it
wrote
efficient.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, you wrote that. In Clojure or in Java?
Yeah.
The first
in
implementation?
Java, obviously.
Oh, in Java. Okay. Wow. You
I
are
mean,
really...
just ask me anything, Ask me anything.
Exactly.
Ask me anything. Yeah. I mean, we want to talk about like the depth of those trees. Get into it.
Which line number in the code?
So
anyway, yeah.
I read probably the only available blog post on it with this drawing and the structural sharing and the HAMT and I was never able to understand deeply, and I was really excited. But when I wanted to explain to a colleague, I made a joke of myself because I started to explain blah, 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 and I couldn't find my words. So don't try at home; it's very dangerous. But what you can try is to implement a similar algorithm that works on any hash maps. And that's what Lodash does. So Lodash, the most popular JavaScript library, has a FP flavor. There is something called Lodash FP.
Yeah, it's the immutable.
Yes, exactly.
It's immutable.
Right? It's immutable.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. You pass to it a regular JavaScript native, hash maps. And when you call set or even set in, you could say set at pass a dot b dot c dot d da 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 da, and then it will create a new version of the map with the change, and it does it with structural sharing. So it's efficient. It doesn't do a deep clone like I would do.
No.
And what's more, what excites me is that I was able to implement this algorithm, and it's 7 lines of JavaScript or in any language. It's not difficult. The trick is called path copying. You copy the path to do structural sharing. And I was so excited then that I asked myself, so why do we need efficient data structure? If the algorithm works fine with native data structures, why do we need special data structures to benefit from efficient immutability? And there are 2 answers. Answer number 1 is that to enforce immutability, to make sure that the data is not changed. But you can enforce that in JavaScript or in Java. So that's a weak answer. And the second answer, which I don't know if it's a good one or a bad one, is that this algorithm breaks when you have too many nodes at the same level. So if you have a map with 1,000 fields, each time you make a change, you have to copy to do a shallow copy of 1,000 fields. And if it's a vector with 1,000 fields, the same. Whereas in Clojure, the implementation breaks somehow the maps and the nodes so that you copy only a part of the map. You don't copy everything. But I think that in a regular application, you don't have a map with 1,000 fields, right? If it's a record, you don't have more than 10 fields at one level.
No.
So that might be sorry. So that might be a very good transition path.
Yeah, it's a good way to think about it for other languages or for other environments which need immutability, but don't have the if you can do it in 10, 20 lines, 5 lines, whatever, of some language, that's much better than spending 6 months in a hammock.
Yeah,
and reading reading papers on it. Yeah.
And in OCaml, for example, they have semantics for that. So when you have a record in OCaml with specific fields, like a data class, and let's say a graph of data classes, you could say, I want to do a change a nested change in the nested field in my data class, and it will do the structural sharing on its own.
Okay, so it's built into the runtime already.
The compiler, even, I would say.
Oh,
and
compiler.
they
Okay.
have
Wow.
they have semantics for that. You could say I want my user with a change, and the change could be in the product and the price of the product of the user.
But I don't think there is a big argument against immutability, right? Your second principle. I mean, I don't think there is. I think most of the programming communities now more or less realize that yes, immutability, at least by default, should be the way we program, and you should reach out to immutability for performance reasons or whatever. I think only that is the time when you want to move. Yeah.
What the only thing I would say about immutability is that it's a terrible, terrible name, because I think immutability is, it's difficult to understand it,
Yes.
And also because you do want to have like change. You just mentioned it. I want to change something, but I want to get a new structurally shared copy of it. So the way I think about it, the way I would rather people talk about it, is like automatically version managed data, efficiently version managed data, because I know that strictly academically it's not correct. Yeah, but fuck that, because people don't know what immutability is. It's overloaded. It means too many different things. But if I say to you, how about if you could automatically get a version of every single data, every single bit of data that you had, like Git, you could have Git for your data. Wouldn't that be awesome? Oh, it'd be very expensive. No, we've got tricks. We can make it super cheap. So the diffs are very, very cheap.
By the way, Git does exactly this trick. Git does exactly this trick. It copies every file, every blob, or every pointer to a file in every folder that you change in a commit. And it breaks. If you have a folder with 1,000 files, which you don't have, but if you have, you will break it. Git will not be efficient.
Right, it gets slow. Yeah.
But I think already adding like immutability is like Git is already, giving significant amount of trouble for people to understand shit, because Git is already complicated system. I think we can just stick with version data. I think that's already. I think that's enough for people to figure out what is happening. I think when we say immutable, if you're not, maybe for us we have this I don't know, like we are used to it so much that we don't even think about that word anymore, because it has a specific meaning to people who are using Clojure or Haskell or something. But the people who are not using it, I mean, if you say immutable, then they're like, oh, that's fucked up. No, that doesn't make any sense.
Although it's quite well admitted that immutability is good, in the book I had to bring an argument, and I didn't want just to quote, referential transparency, hidden side effects, and blah blah blah. So I had to think in the context of the library management system, what would be the benefit of immutability? And there are two benefits. One, that you could restore the system to its previous state, like undo a mutation very, very easily and cheaply. And number two, which is I found it very interesting, is that you have a way to manage concurrency very cheaply, because you can run all the mutations in parallel, and just before you submit the mutation, you check if there are a conflict with a mutation that has finished before you were able to finish. And you do a diff, like in React, you do a diff between your the two mutations that run in parallel, and sometimes you are able to
the virtual library and the real library.
Yes, the virtual DOM. And I think that's an interesting way, because then computing the diff is cheap. If you change only the versions through structural sharing, most of the nodes will be the same, and you can compare them by reference. You don't need to check the value of the leaves. So the diff algorithm is
Yes.
very, very efficient, and it
Hmm.
allows highly scalable concurrency management with no explicit versioning. You don't have to say I am version 10, I am version 11. It's only based on the content.
Yeah.
And
So lock-free concurrency.
Lock-free concurrency,
Yeah.
yes. And that's what, in a sense, that what swap does in Clojure. The swap on the atom.
Mm-hmm.
So lock free concurrency means you get free locks, right? Locks are free.
Locks are free, yeah.
Yeah.
You can go to jail very easily.
But the most challenging one, I think, is the principal number 3. The representation of data as data with no types.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the one where there are the highest number of
Resistance.
Resistance.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's either resistance or triviality. Because if you
let's call them Philistines, yeah, for the purposes of this podcast.
Yes. Yeah, Philistine.
Because we have now a flavor of this podcast now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And let's imagine the discussion with a JavaScript guy. We say, okay, it's trivial. What do you want from me? Of course, I represent data as data. So it's not an interesting discussion. But when you discuss with a guy that comes from a statically typed language, either functional or not functional, he would say, no, I cannot live without type safety. And why? Why would I want to get rid of type safety? And here I'm not sure I have good answers for that. First of all, it lays on lots of emotions and conviction and past and etc. What I find more interesting is, first of all, to acknowledge that even in Clojure, we are not happy to have no type at all, no schema, nothing. Yeah. It's fine when you write a small script, but when you build a production system, it becomes a mess very, very quickly. So instead of saying schema or not schema, I would say coupled schema or not coupled schema. Should the schema be part of the data, or should it be decoupled from the data and available? And in some places, I could say, okay, here it makes sense to validate that the data is valid according to a schema. And in some places, I don't care when I have a merge function, let's say, between two hash maps. I don't want to say that the merge function works only with the hash maps that has this or that field. I mean, there are functions that are inherently generic, so there is no sense, there is no point on typing those functions. But when we are at the application level, let's say
I think at the domain level it makes sense. Yeah.
At the domain level it makes sense. Yeah. If I have an entity that represents a user, I want to make sure that the ID is there and that the email is there
or the username is there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that is the main as you said. I think that is the main argument for, if I'm talking to a Scala programmer, if I'm talking to Rust programmer, or even Haskell programmer, I think that is the main argument, right? Because most of the times the systems that you are designing, they are not generic systems. Most of the times that the systems that you're designing are systems that have very specific domain, and people are used to these DDD concepts, like the domain-driven design concepts, where you define the nouns, and then where you define the bounded context, and within this context, what is the terminology that we're going to use, and they mean something. Writing a Clojure core function is completely different than writing a function that is dealing with, in your case, like DNS system or an IP.
Yes.
Where it makes sense to have that there is a piece of data that I can recognize as an IP, and the operations that I'm performing between two IPs are more specific than the operations that I'm performing on core data structures. So that's the friction, I think, with the static
Yes.
and dynamic languages.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that the language that does it the best right now in 2021 is not Clojure. I think it's TypeScript. I don't know if you guys tried
Oh,
TypeScript,
okay.
but I gave it a
No, I
try
haven't.
because
Yeah.
one of the readers challenged me and say every argument that you make in the book in TypeScript, I can implement it in a nicer way. And TypeScript gives you types a la carte. So you could write JavaScript and it's a valid TypeScript. And here and there you could say, okay, here I want to say I have a map, not an any object. I have a map with those fields. And it's very the semantics of the types is very, very elaborated. And it's dynamic, and you could I don't know all the details, but I ran through the tutorial and I was really amazed by the flexibility that it gives you as a developer.
So that is the 30% that we are missing, right? In the wrap up, use TypeScript.
Yeah, probably.
But I often thought that, and I was saying this to David Nolan actually, was that we should. Wouldn't it be a bit nicer in some ways to target TypeScript rather than JavaScript? For like, but that ship has sailed, I think. But someone else can write a program that targets TypeScript as a sort of compile language, because then you would actually get all the type safety at runtime if you wanted it. If you had a spec or if you wanted something like that, you could do all that kind of stuff in TypeScript.
But you need to bring.
But in the end, it's
semantics
JavaScript
into Clojure, right?
But in the end, it's JavaScript, because TypeScript is still JavaScript. It's not TypeScript.
I think that TypeScript
is just like Clojure script. It's just a compiler.
I think even it's simpler. I think that when you compile TypeScript, you get a JavaScript with no types at all. It's just
yeah. That's what I mean.
It will just either break or say, okay, it's just a step in the middle. So I think it makes, and I did something funny. 2 weeks ago, I published something like 6 challenges, 6 small exercises that in Clojure or in data programming is very natural to implement. And I challenged the community, okay, how would you write it in another language? And I got people that submitted solutions in TypeScript, in Ruby, in Elm, in Elixir, and in Go, even someone submitted in Go. And in TypeScript, it feels very, very natural, because you can play with really, it's like, how do you say, cutting the ice and eating it, or cutting the chocolate and having it.
Having the cake and eat it.
Yeah. You have the cake and you eat it. And
I think
really,
that's already overloaded, right? Having the cake would also already mean I'm eating the cake. Yeah. But yeah, I think, as I said, maybe, well, I mean, there are other niceties that you're getting. Well, you can do data-oriented programming in TypeScript, but you cannot do all the stuff that you do with Clojure in other languages. So that's probably, still like a USP of Clojure. Like you still have the Lispiness of it. So all the advantages that you get because it is a Lisp, you don't have that in JavaScript or TypeScript. You can't do the same level of metaprogramming, for example. So, and those things are, also the language is easier to learn because there are not many complex shit that you need to learn to be productive. So that is still pro Clojure argument, I would say.
Definitely. I think we're on a very thin ledge, though. If metaprogramming is all we've got. I'm sorry. I think
it's you can write code that writes code. Like, what do you mean? Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? Yes, shut up, use Clojure. But I think in tips of the data-oriented programming, I get the concept now that all these pieces are basically leading ideas behind Clojure, right? So you would say that, right? This is how you build larger Clojure programs with still some pain points, which is, as we discussed, like introducing the types, introducing bit more confidence into the system, I would say, at some level. when you're programming at a certain level. Super cool. So how far is your book now? So can people go and buy it right now? Is it in?
People can buy it right now, and the price is lower. I think it's $27 for the digital copy. And every time a chapter is released, every month or something like that, they get an email and with the new content. And they can collaborate and ask questions.
Does it have its own website, or is it something that people just go to manning.com and then search for data-oriented programming?
You write data-oriented programming, and it's maybe we can end up with something that is, I don't know if it's sad or good news. Do you know the story of the salesman from England 100 years ago or something like that went to Africa to sell shoes? Two salesmen?
No.
You don't know this story? So two salesmen from a big shoe company were sent to sell shoes in Africa to do a market study. And the first one when he went back to the UK, say, "Oh, it's terrible. Nobody wears shoes. The market is zero." And the second one say, "Oh, huge opportunity. Nobody wears shoes."
Nobody wears shoes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there is nothing on the internet about data-oriented programming. If you Google data-oriented programming, you will find only my stuff.
Yours is the first.
There is no Wikipedia entry. There is no articles.
That's a bit weird, actually.
I found the guy that invented the word data-oriented programming, someone named Eugene Kuznetsov. He was kind enough to discuss with me on Hangout a month ago. And he invented that in 2002, so before Clojure. And actually, he made a patent of it. And he built a company called Data Power that was sold to IBM. So that's where it starts.
So we're all going to get sued.
Probably. And then you have data-oriented design, which is patterns from the gaming industry, where the goal there is to improve performance. So it has nothing to do with what we are talking about. You have data-driven programming, which is the ability to express logic as data. But it's not what we were discussing today. And the topic of representing data as data, which sounds so natural, it has no cover on the internet. Only in Clojure. If you Google for data-oriented programming after the Manning marketing staff, you will find an article from Cognitech that says Clojure is great because it's data-oriented. That's it.
Oh, nice. So you found like something that is not there on the internet, which is pretty rare these days.
Yes.
and not in collective psyche.
What do they call it when you get like a one response from Google? The Google flop or something, or the Google. There's a special phrase when you put in normal English words and you get back one result.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know it was possible.
Well, it used to be. I think it's less and less possible now, but there's a special name for it, like a Google flop or something.
Okay.
Wow.
Listeners, please phone in.
Yes. Please
call this number.
No, not call. Write to us.
Oh yeah, write to us.
It's a postbox number something.
Yeah.
We read every letter, by the way. So please do send. All the fan mail. It basically takes us, I think, at least 2 hours of my day. Reading through all the fan mail and responding to them personally. And we do send autograph stuff as well back to people. So
sealed
if you write to us,
sealed with
exactly.
Especially in these COVID times, it's very valuable.
So what do you guys think about the question that I asked us about namespace keywords?
I think it's yes. One of us should say yes, and one of us should say no.
Okay.
Well, see, the thing is,
and
if
I
you
say
think
maybe.
about like,
I'd say maybe.
Yeah, I think I'd say yes, but not inside. I think we find this problem like at work, and I guess you find the same thing as well. Is that there's this that sometimes you have like in a spec you have like all these namespace things where you just say ::foo. And of course, it's very convenient that you don't have to type out, blah, 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 dot, blah, 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 dot, blah, dot, blah, dot, blah, dot, blah, foo. That would be very tedious. So that's really good. But it's kind of then annoying to use them outside of Clojure. It's a mess,
Yes.
But if you have like in the atomic schema, you have like entity/foo, then it makes sense. I think that could be okay. I think you can. So I'd say one is like internal, like convenience, and the other one is a bit more structural for proper managing data in a good way, which is like around entities. And I'm a fan of that.
My view on that is that as long as your namespace is only containing data, then the namespace keywords make sense. Because if you have the namespace keywords representing data and then you have functions that are operating in that namespace, then you're essentially trying to encapsulate those things in one place, right? Then your namespace, if you squint really hard, it looks like a class again.
Yes.
in Java. So
we use that kind of approach for specs actually. So we have like specs for particular types of things using namespace keywords, and it works quite well.
I don't think that namespace in the sense of a Clojure namespace, but I would say a fully qualified prefix, so that the field name is unique. And I think that it's an inherent part of data-oriented programming because it's like the chicken and the egg. Where do you start? Do you start from a map? And the map has several fields, or no, you start from a field and the map aggregates fields. And I think that in the data-oriented programming approach, we start from fields. Each field lives on its own, has its own right to live. And the same field could be part of 100 maps. You could have a user, you could have a email user, you could have a product user, you could have but then if the name of the field is short with no context, then it's meaningless. So I think it's a logical consequence, or it's the next step. And I think that's the reason why Rich Hickey spends so much time to explain that the field should be decomplected from the maps, and you should spec them before you spec the map. So if a user email is an email, then it has the semantics of an email. No matter if it's in a map, a big map, or
because you can have like a input map and output map. You can have all kinds of transformation maps that deal with users, and to have it as just one map is mental.
And in GraphQL, they don't have that.
But isn't that like the whole the concept of an atom? That's from a data perspective. That's what an atom is, isn't it? It's a field. It's like the lowest level, the lowest unit of.
You don't mean a Clojure atom. You mean an atom in physics?
No. Yeah, yes. I mean, also in Lisp,
Yes. Like but in statically typed languages, fields don't exist. At runtime, a field is just an offset in a class. Yes. It's just an offset, and it's a tragedy in a sense. That the most important piece of the information, which is the name of the field, it fades away during compilation. And by the way, that's half true, because, for example, in Java, they're available through reflection.
Exactly.
Every JSON serialization library uses reflection. There is no other way to serialize. There is this Google library, not the one that we use in Clojure, not the Jackson. There is JSON, Google JSON, and they use reflection. You pass a record or a class, and you get back a string with no annotation, with nothing, through reflection. So even in Java, which is maybe the most static language in both sense of the word, they acknowledge the need for one, like we talked before, data classes or records, and reflections or having access to field names.
Cool. So I think we
teaser to end on there.
Yeah, exactly. So we covered at least the gist of your book, and I'm pretty sure I think people, I think even for people who are familiar with Clojure, right? I mean, it makes sense to have have a go at it to understand it in a much more holistic way, or maybe
Yes.
the fundamental way. So I think it's a really good idea to write these concepts down to communicate them better. As you said in the
Yes.
beginning. So it's pretty awesome. And obviously I haven't read the book. As you can see, I'm not a reading kind of guy. but as soon as your book is published in full thing, then I'll certainly give that a try. And so it is available as a early access publication right now, right? Manning Me
Yes, it's called MIP,
thingy right now.
Manning Early
Yeah.
Access Program. And
Program,
if
yeah, sorry.
you just Google it, you find the you'll find it. And if you go to my Twitter profile, you will get a discount code, and and if you really
That's
want
very
to buy the
kind.
book and you want to write a review and you don't have $20 to spend, you can send me an email and I will offer you a book in exchange of a
that's
review.
awesome. Yeah,
that's very kind.
Yeah.
The other thing I like about your book, I mean, I've skimmed it. Like I say, I haven't read it fully yet, but I've had a skim through of it. And what I like is that you have a very conversational style in the book. Is that it's a kind of like two colleagues speaking to each other, which makes it very readable, I think. It's a kind of like, we didn't really speak about that, but I think you've got a nice writing style. It's kind of, it's very casual. But it's sort of one colleague challenging the other colleague, which is nice, I think that people will find it very approachable and very kind of relatable, in that sense.
Yeah. The only problem is that I became a schizophrenic since then.
So it's more Plato's dialogues rather than regular books. So people actually talking, and the interlocutor and everybody discussing stuff, which is pretty awesome. Nice. So go check out the book, and we'll put the link in the description, obviously, and then also a big shout out to Yehonathan for coming back again and sharing all this awesome knowledge. Thanks a lot, Yehonathan, for joining us again. And we'd love to have you back again in I don't know, in 2 years. Who knows? You'll find another thing that is not there on the internet yet, and then you write a book about it.
Okay,
that would be awesome. So that's it from us. And stay safe. And we'll be soon back with yet another awesome episode. And thanks again, Yehonathan.
Thanks again,
Thank
Yehonathan.
you.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
Excellent stuff.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Defn. And the awesome vegetarian music or the track is Melon Hamburger by Pizzeri. And the show's audio is mixed by Wouter Dullert. I'm pretty sure I butchered his name. Maybe you should insert your own name here, Dullert.
Wouter.
If you'd like to support us, please do check out our Patreon page. And you can show your appreciation to all the hard work or the lack of hard work that we're doing. And you can also catch up with either Ray, with me, for some unexplainable reason. You want to interact with us, then do check us out on Slack, Clojurian Slack or Clojureverse, or on Zulip, or just at us at Defn Podcast on Twitter. Enjoy your day and see you in the next episode.